I'm generally not one to jump on a hate bandwagon, but considering recent events, I feel obligated to make another video about marathons since I put out a somewhat optimistic review about the alpha a couple weeks ago. If you haven't heard, Bungie's in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. I'll be going over their less than ideal AMA they hosted, which was after news broke out about the marathon team stealing art assets for their game. The AMA was originally set up prior to the news breaking, and I want to go over what was said there as it's relevant to a majority of my concerns I listed in the previous video. And now I have even more concerns. Since this has been talked about in length already, I'm going to go ahead and try and make this as brief as possible. But on May 15th, the artist Anti-Real stated the Marathon Alpha released recently, and its environments are covered with assets lifted from poster designs I made in 2017, where they tagged the Bungie Twitter account and Joseph Cross, the franchise art director for Marathon. Adding multiple pictures, they went on to say that Bungie is not obligated to hire me when making a game that draws overwhelmingly from the same design language they have refined for the past decade, but clearly the work was good enough to pillage for ideas and plaster all over their game without pay or contribution. I don't have the resources nor the energy to spare to pursue this legally, but I have lost count of the number of times a major company has deemed it easier to pay a designer to imitate or steal their work than to write me an email. In 10 years, I have never made a consistent income from this work, and I am tired of designers from huge companies moodboarding and parasitizing my designs while I struggle to make a living. The pictures and art were not just taken for ideas, but sometimes directly copy and pasted in. Now, I'm not going to argue with anyone in the comments about art direction, as Bungie have already made a statement that they did indeed steal their art, which is the core issue here, not the art direction. I mean, there's even a tweet from Anti-Real from 2024 that says, I hid Loss, which is a meme, in my designs 6 years ago and nobody caught on. To which someone recently replied with a screenshot in game of Marathon with the Lost meme in there, which why would they even need to do that? There's plenty more blatant examples of Bungie using their creative work without compensation, but realistically, the most embarrassing part about this is that they've done this more than once. In fact, several times throughout Destiny. You can actually see a list of all the times Bungie have taken the artistic work without pay or permission and used it in their own marketing or game in the screenshot below. This all happened the day before Bungie had a planned Twitch stream AMA, so it couldn't have come at a worse time. They tried to get ahead of it and made a lackluster response on the Marathon dev team account on Twitter, not even their main Marathon account or the Bungie account, and said, we immediately investigated a concern regarding unauthorized use of artist decals in Marathon and confirmed that a former Bungie artist, come on, included these in a texture sheet that was ultimately used in game. This issue was unknown by our existing art team, and we are still reviewing how the oversight occurred, which is crazy considering Joseph Cross and multiple other people on the Marathon art team have followed Anti-Real on Twitter for years. They continued on to say, we take matters like this very seriously, which is also crazy because, as mentioned, they've been caught doing this multiple times. We have reached out to Anti-Real to discuss the issue and are committed to do right by the artist. Obviously, this did not bode well with the Twitter community, and Bungie were rightfully land blasted all night and the following day until the Bungie team set up their Marathon AMA, and boy, was it something. Now, this is where I'm going to get a little overcritical, and this isn't the point of the video, but man, was it a bummer to see a AAA studio struggle with a Twitch stream AMA. As someone who used to stream 9 years ago with a green blanket held up by duct tape and willpower, and a blue Yeti mic that was so awful that I had to have a degree in audio engineering just to get it to not sound like absolute dog shit, I was more than upset with the state of their stream testing and production. Mics were echoing, one camera setup with no scene changes, intro, outro, background music, or of course any videos because apparently they couldn't use any of the material since they were too busy scrubbing assets. Just two guys who didn't want to be there in any way, shape, or form, staring at a camera with blank stares while they went over things no one cared about. Okay, on to the actual meat and potatoes of the AMA. They opened with a statement from Joe Cross that it was a former employee, alright. They are auditing all the work from Anti-Real, removing all of it, claiming that they will make this right with her. But the tough thing about this is you should have just hired her from the start. And now they likely won't want to work with you even if you did offer them a job because who would want to work for a company that blatantly stole your work? They'll likely settle, but even if Anti-Real had the opportunity to take things to court, it's not an ideal situation for her as it costs tons of money and major corporations have the cash to delay. And since Anti-Real already mentioned their living situation, that's a no-go. After this, for some reason, Joe stayed on screen and remained there for the entirety of the AMA, looking like he did not want to be there, and rightfully so, of course. Joe Ziegler then carried on with the rest of the AMA, and I'm not going to address everything said, but I definitely do need to bring up things that I have previously mentioned in my video. For starters, proximity chat was not confirmed, and instead, they beat around the bush with a lot of dev talk, which is going to be a common theme in this AMA and a huge problem itself. They said that they don't have a solution to it right now and are still in talks about it internally. They said they were asking the team, what's our version of that? Instead of just simply implementing it. Also, the UI for voice comms was very poor, and there wasn't any confirmation of getting rid of muted mics in all lobbies by default. Also, the three purple dots are terrible UI, but they're still thinking of ideas. There was no mention of solo lobbies at all, which is incredibly disappointing and a huge loss for them, in my opinion. They didn't show any of the fourth map, even though they said it would be teased or talked about soon. This wasn't a guarantee in this AMA, but they couldn't show anything because they were scrubbing all of their assets because of the art dispute. There was no discussion about ranked, and again, another massive miss by them. They answered like 4 questions from the chat. The first couple were mainly related to the art, and the rest weren't really imperative at all. When they asked, what's the biggest piece of feedback the team wants to change at launch? They mentioned things that weren't even feedback from the players, like AI combatants being too aggressive, which, if anything, they should be. And for some reason, they talked in length about the marathon bags as loot instead of bodies because apparently a lot of people want them to be bodies instead of bags, which is fine, but it's not like a core issue at all, and very much a small design choice. But for some reason, that was a 10-minute conversation. I get if you don't like it, but please focus, people. They also talked about other things already mentioned in previous AMAs and talked about things that are kind of obvious, like balance changes for Sniper, but absolutely nothing about Void Invisibility, which is also another letdown, as this completely destroys the competitive nature of shooters when you can stand completely still and go entirely invisible. They did mention they wanted to investigate the reviving mechanic, and it shouldn't be so easy to revive. They mention it should take longer to revive each time you die, which is cool, but that's about it. The things I wanted to have addressed were not. And a lot of the way they answered questions were, we've been thinking about this internally, or we're still brainstorming ideas for this, or the team is excited about what we're working on, with absolutely nothing to show. This is detrimental, considering the supposed launch of Marathon is still September. They can't show anything, they can't give concrete details, a roadmap, nothing. It's also concerning, too, as I previously mentioned, that they advertise that you can customize your runner and playstyle, but this narrative does not coincide with the hero based gameplay. Sure, you can edit your runner to somewhat of a build, but even then, it's still heavily reliant on luck and finding the right mods and parts, which I guess they're at least aware of. They could add some sort of crafting system, which was mentioned on the AMA, but then you're at risk of going against the extraction genre if you can just craft anything to your desire. Also, crafting in Destiny is quite the hot topic. This is why I feel like the game will have an identity crisis, in a somewhat similar fashion to Destiny. It still wants to be a couple different genres mashed together, but can't nail down either one because the other side is still prevalent. This also splits the player base. I would know because I still see people on Twitter have arguments on how much looter of a shooter Destiny should be, and both sides are valid, but this is what happens when you can't decide on what the specific focus of your game is. You get people who have completely different viewpoints on what the game should be, which ends up making feedback incredibly difficult for the devs to navigate when they themselves haven't confirmed the identity of their game either. I initially said I was cautiously optimistic about this game, and the caution was me being mindful of years of Bungie not being able to balance properly, not live up to their expectations, and now the company has become even more of a husk of itself in the past couple years. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, saying that they should be swift in addressing core issues and real balancing changes, since they don't have the excuse of needing to separately balance due to PvE. But instead, it seems they've gotten worse at communication over the years, not being able to clearly and concisely target pain points. They have no vision for their future changes, only talking about ideas and further brainstorming, even though the game is way too close to launch. I used to play Destiny and think about the potential it has, what it could be, and would play it in the hopes that that potential would see the light of day, only for the issues to persist year after year. Eventually, I gave up viewing the game with the idea of the potential and took it for face value. And I'm doing the same now, before the game launches, because as I mentioned in the previous video, gunplay alone cannot save your game. At least Destiny has a hardcore enough of a fan base for them to turn a blind eye on the atrocities of PvP, or their continuous art theft, or even the massive lack in communication, or the drip content system that they continue to pull their players on with. But with Marathon, they don't have that luxury, as they don't have a player base at all yet. And even the few people that were able to play in the playtest were divided. This game seems to have been cursed from the get go, with almost 6 years of development time, aged hero based mechanics, trying to fit in an already expiring extraction shooter genre with nothing new to show. Unfortunately, I must side with the Doom posters who were right, for not the entirely correct reasons, from the start. This game needs to be delayed for a very long time, if not indefinitely, as I don't think a delay is enough to counter all the massive issues with the game. It does not help that there's recently been multiple articles published about ex Bungie devs saying Marathon leadership was extremely toxic and humiliating to work with, and they refused to listen to the devs. I think a complete overhaul would be best, as it feels like the game had undergone years of identity crisis. I will say, even though it's incredibly rare, there are some exceptions of when a developer doesn't like the original vision for the game and scrapped it with the approval of the publisher to go on and create something incredible. I can't really say how many times, but this actually happened with Doom 2016 and Bethesda. id Software were making basically Doom 4, which was so bad it was being called Call of Doom. It didn't fit with their visions, and they asked to basically start over, and Bethesda surprisingly agreed, which led to one of the all time greatest revivals of a franchise ever, and one of the best FPSs of the last decade, and then Doom Eternal following up on that. Do I think that's gonna happen with Bungie and Sony? Definitely not. But hey, you never know. Even if they got rid of hero based gameplay and focused on customizing your runner, even if they were swift in their balancing, and even if they rehauled the art direction entirely, I don't think I can get myself to pay $40 for this game. And even if it was free, I don't think I could stomach playing it after all the atrocities. Anyways, hopefully the Arc Raiders beta comes out soon.